So we wanted to talk about home birth a little bit today. We have three kids, Levi, Wyatt, and Kaya. All three, in theory, were going to be born at home. Levi, the oldest, was born in the hospital. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then our other two, Wyatt and Kaya, were both born at home, water births in our house.
Yeah. And so we wanted to hop on here today and just kind of spread some knowledge about home birth. You know, when Jason and I first heard about home birth, it seemed really weird and not really something that we thought people usually do unless they were Amish or like in the good old days. So
Or like stuck in a car on the side,
yeah, like
you wouldn't choose to do it on purpose.
And you know, in chiropractic school, it was really woven into our education. A lot of our professors had home births.
I think the more you start to think about it, the more you understand. I mean, we're humans, but we're mammals, right? And mammals have been having babies for thousands and thousands of years, unassisted. You know, the mom is.
Our bodies are designed to do this,
yeah.
And so as long as all the markers and you're healthy and everything's okay with the baby, there's really no reason that we can't do this. Our bodies are meant to do this, so it's a really empowering place to be when you can get to the point of having birth at home. So we basically want to share the 3 myths and then our 3 truths around home birth. All right, so myth number 1 is that home birth is for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody. As Jason said, our firstborn was intended to be a home birth, and when my water broke at 35 weeks, to the hospital we went, no questions asked. We knew at that point that our options for home birth were over. You've definitely got to be in a certain point of gestation. Everything's got to be great, or you go to the hospital. So
yeah, I mean, not only, there's a couple things. I think, is it for everybody? First of all, you have to eventually get to a place where you think that that's a good idea, that you understand the risks, you understand the rewards, you understand why you might choose to do this. You understand that if things were to go wrong or to go differently than what you thought they were going to, just like with Levi, that there's always other plans, you know, mixed into that process. So it could be for anybody, but there's a whole process. I think, you know, a couple, you know, particularly the mom, but the couple need to go through to talk through and understand, you know, all those options and what they all mean before, you know, doing something. But it could be for anybody, but even when you think it is, it still may not be, because, you know, life throws curveballs all the time. So
totally.
But what was the second one?
Well, so the truth would be that, you know, just like anything, it takes certain parameters that you have to fall into in order to qualify for a home birth. And then it also obviously has to be your choice. And for Jason and us, again, after going through chiropractic school, the choice became pretty obvious. But in my mind, I always knew that I just wasn't necessarily all that comfortable in a hospital. And, you know, when we were getting ready to get pregnant, a lot of the things I was reading were talking about how women, we really turn into that mammalian feeling inside of us when we go into labor, and we want to feel safe and quiet and dark. And when I would picture a hospital, I just didn't feel like I would feel that way. It didn't feel safe and protected and private for me. So learning about home birth was really what I felt was a really good option. Right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You know, I have to say also, just watching Melissa go through 3 deliveries, that the 2 at home, I mean, she was clearly more comfortable, clearly more relaxed. The process all went much smoother than it did in the hospital. I mean, for me too, but it's easy for me. I'm just a support staff.
For you?
I had a really hard time. You don't realize how hard it is for me.
You don't know what I'm going through. Anyway, I think a really important point too is that, you know, again, it's not for everybody, because I do think it requires a certain level of training and commitment. And what I mean by that is I basically pictured my labor and delivery like a marathon or like an event. And so I did everything I could during our pregnancy to really mentally prepare for that. I read books on women going through natural labors, long ones, short ones, hard ones, easy ones, so that I had a story around it, and I had their tools that they use to get through. And, you know, I went to natural birthing classes where they talked about what is the first stage, the second stage, the third stage of labor going to be like, so that when I had these sensations, I was like, okay, now I know where I am. I know what's coming next. You know, a lot of times we spend more time educating ourselves and choosing a car and we read up more on like choosing a car for our family than in preparing for our birth. So it became a really empowering process for me to know what my body was going to go through. So I don't think it's for everyone, because you've got to be wanting to look into that information and prepare to train for the event.
So I think the training and the reading, you're talking about different stories and how that process, so that kind of takes us to the second one, which is?
Yeah, so the second myth is that when you have a baby at home or in the water, that it doesn't hurt.
I think that's true. I mean, it didn't seem like it was that big of a
You know, labor is called labor. It's work, and you feel it. And again, I think, you know, doing the reading and the educating beforehand, I understood what I was going to be going through. It's not like I thought that I was going to have this experience with music and oils and quiet and peaceful, and so it wouldn't hurt. I mean, I was screaming, I was yelling, I was letting it out. But I knew, you know, when I got to that point where it was like really intense, and I didn't know, you know, there were definitely times when I felt vulnerable, and could I get through this stage? I knew that that's the second stage of labor. So in my mind, for me, I pictured it like a hill, and I had to get to the top of the hill in order to push our baby out. So, you know, that became a really important part of the process for me. How about for you? Jason felt stuff too. Also, I was kind of taught to not think of it as contractions or pain, but surges and sensations that told my body how to move to help get the baby out. And so that was really helpful too. But I will say, I mean, I was squeezing so
It hurt
hard.
me too.
I think you had
in a different way.
I think you had nail marks all over your body, and there were like some bruises on your cheeks.
But
you were a rock star.
It did. So I would say, again, just as a observer, you know, and there's differences too, because Levi was the first. So I think that also plays a role in this whole process. But being, I think, the hardest, right?
Yeah.
In general, I think the first. But
yeah.
So, you know, there's that too. But I also think, I mean, Levi was also only, what was he?
He was like 5'3". He was tiny.
Yeah, he was a little guy.
It was just a long labor. It was 17 hours compared to the second two, which are like 3 hours and 2 hours.
Right.
I think partially because they were second and third baby, and partially because I felt very safe.
Right.
Yep. So let's see. I don't remember where else we were going with the myths and truths, but I will say this. I think part of what is definitely key in preparing yourself, if you want to have a home birth, you want to have a water birth, you want to have a natural birth, is picking your team. Because when we are in labor, when we are having our babies, we get very vulnerable. And, you know, Jason did just as much training as I did, and Jason has a lot of trust in the human body. And I mean, you were essentially my doula for Levi. You know, we kind of walked into a high risk situation when the water broke at 35 weeks, and you know, the doctors right away wanted to induce me and break my water. No, not break my water. My water broke, but they wanted to start Pitocin, and they wanted to like have me on the bed and all this whole big thing. And so Jason, you know, he created a safe space for me, and he took them out in the hall and was like, you know, asking them, can you meet us halfway? Like, can we just watch for certain things, and can we give her space, and can we try to let her walk?
I think the biggest thing that I learned through that experience was that, you know, I had no idea what a birth plan was. I didn't know you needed one. I didn't know like why that was even a thing or why it would be important. We had no plans whatsoever of going to the hospital. So the fact that we ended up in the hospital was like a huge shock to both of us in the moment. We had like no bags. We had nothing packed. We had no clue.
He got lost on the way there. It's like right up the road. He was a little nervous.
So, I mean, that was just, you know, so you learn, right? But, you know, we had some indication of what we would want and what we didn't want. And it became obvious that, you know, and it's nothing wrong, but you know, there's protocols and procedures in the hospital. And so, you know, there's basically step 1, step 2, step 3, and it goes in this order, and it happens at this time. And these are the reasons we do this and that. If you have a birth plan, or you have an idea of like, this is ideally, this is what the experience would look like. Obviously, if there's, you know, anything that's, you know, serious danger or issues that are going on, we could revise that. But, you know, that's a conversation that needs to happen pretty much like on a regular basis, ongoing while you're there, because each person, like, then the, you know, the shift changes in the nurse, and they're like, oh, it's time to do this. Like if somebody isn't there with you to support those ideas and values and the things that you're looking for, the chances of it happening are pretty low. So, you know, learning about what those processes are and learning what you're trying to get out of that experience, and then having those repetitive conversations throughout the time even sometimes, having a conversation that's a little bit, it's not confrontational, but it's like, hey, this is what we're hoping to get, and and this is the reason why we're hoping to get this, and work with us here. So that was a big piece of it too.
Yeah, I think I was so lucky that Jason has so much trust in the human body and really knew so much going in because he's a chiropractor and because of his medical background. And for people that don't have that, I hands down recommend either hiring the right people to be there to support you, which the doctors usually they're way late into the process when you're having a baby. They basically serve as catcher, and the nurses at the hospital are who you get, and you have no control over that. But hire a doula, because those are the people that are going to be backing you up and telling you you're doing a good job. Like I was saying, most women get into a really vulnerable position when you get into the work phases of labor, and to look up and have someone tell you your baby's doing great, you're doing great, this is all how it's supposed to be, instead of having people kind of questioning or not trusting the process, is a night and day difference in how I felt right during delivery. So that I think is huge and so important. And okay, so I think we kind of summed up a little bit of stuff. Also, what I would say is, you can do your research. There's a time and a place for everything. There's a time and a place for a hospital birth. There's a time and place for cesarean section. Anytime cesarean sections are being done over 18% of the time, that's like the general rule, they're being used more than they should, more than they're intended to. And so they actually have a negative effect, because if there's situations where it shouldn't be used, it's not only not as helpful, but it can actually decrease the positive outcomes in delivery. Also, if women are getting early induced, if they're having labor progressed unnaturally, you're typically setting yourself up for more interventions. And there's lots of information on that, and I encourage you to do your own research.
Point is, I think there's a lot to it. It's not just like, oh, we have a due date, oh, we're having a baby, and that's just it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many pieces involved, and I think I never really gave it as much thought as I think. I didn't realize how much I needed to give it actually until we were kind of like right there. I think just that part, the part that like you're home, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all done. You're home. You're in your bed. When Kaya was born and the boys were sleeping, and then we woke them up and they came in and they just like had to come into our room,
Mm-hmm.
into our bedroom, and Kaya was there all wrapped up and stuff. It's just like it's a very different experience like that. It's very smooth transition. Yeah, that part's awesome.
Yeah, I would say too, as the mom, I mean, the postpartum recovery, totally different. You can't even compare. When we were in the hospital after Levi, I couldn't sleep. I feel like I didn't sleep for 5 days. We actually ended up in the NICU with him. Yeah. He was totally fine. It was just protocol, but he was the healthiest baby in the NICU. The nurses kept saying it. But literally, I really don't think I slept for 5 days, which is pretty intense after you have your first baby. And right after Wyatt was born at home and right after Kaya was born at home, I nursed them and we fell asleep in my bed together for a chunk of hours after the midwives did the baby check and all that and made sure all was good. We slept, we ate. After Wyatt, we actually had friends over. I was on such a birth high. But it's definitely a beautiful process. If you're someone who's thinking about it, I highly, highly encourage you to look into it. And if you're someone who's on the fence, find a midwife around you. We're so lucky to have the midwives in New Jersey here. They're absolutely amazing.
Yeah, if you're local there.
And they have an open house every month. Go meet around. I mean, it can't hurt. Just get the information. It was one of the best experiences of our lives. And I would almost consider having a fourth just to go through it again, but we're done. We're not. We're done.